Hey, sports fans. If you want to stay in the know with the latest news surrounding the Oregon Ducks, you need to listen to the weekly Webfoot Review podcast on iTunes and Spotify. I'm Jordan Schultz, and every week I'll be here breaking down what's going on in Eugene and how it affects Oregon's football and basketball teams. So if you want unfiltered news and opinions delivered by a lifelong Ducks fan, subscribe to the weekly Webfoot Review on iTunes and Spotify. Go Ducks!
Hey, what's up, Blazer fans? Welcome to the Blazers Edge podcast. I am Tara Bowen-Biggs, joined as always by Blazers outsider Danny Marang. Danny?
No, nothing.
I don't even know. You didn't even give me a chance to respond to that.
This is why nobody ever gives me the soundboard anymore.
Yeah, there's reasons. Well, but we're not alone. We also have Blazers Edge editor Steve Dewald joining us today. Steve, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm enjoying festive eggnog and bourbon drinks and Christmas lights and Mariah Carey. So it's
Good.
Christmas is here.
Sounds like you're all warmed up and ready to roll.
Yep.
You have your Torrey Craig picket fence sign ready to go.
He's my +1 to the Nakatomi Plaza Christmas party this year. So I feel pretty good about that choice.
Okay, we'll get to Torrey in a minute. Let's talk about the fact that it is December 15th, which will go down in history as the day that Mario Hezonja went to his first NFL game. Have you guys been following that on Twitter?
How could you not? It's absolutely hilarious. He is enjoying every last second of it, and it's fantastic. The best part is that the Browns lost, and CJ's sitting there like, are you kidding me? Not again.
Well, best depending on whose vantage point you're looking at it from. But Mario Hezonja certainly has seemed to have had a very good time. And God bless CJ for sticking with that team, because God knows that we can relate, right?
That's not that bad. Come on now.
I know, but when you have high expectations going into a year, and then when they're not panning out, you got to readjust your expectations. And we've done that a couple of times already this year on the podcast. We've talked about our expectations and how they've changed as the injuries pile up. One of the things that has happened most recently is that the Blazers have applied for a disabled player exception. So it's my understanding that the way that works is that it's a set figure, like $2.8 million, that can only be used to bring in a player for the remainder of the year. So they can't use it to trade for somebody who's going to be around for a long time. It's just somebody to cover through the rest of this year. Do I have that right?
For the most part, yes. Like the only differentiations in there are like you probably just need the harder qualifications in that they could trade for somebody, but this has to be the last year of their deal.
Correct. So they could either trade or they can just use it to sign someone who's a free agent.
Correct. And the same thing is true of waivers. If there's a player that is waived but still has years left on his deal, he can only have 1 year. This has to be the final year of his deal. So that's the main qualification behind it all.
Okay. So, Steve, you recently wrote a post about some moderate moves that the Blazers might be able to make after the trade deadline. And now we know this news. You want to walk us through some of the options? And I'm not sure if all of the ones that you mentioned could qualify under this disabled player exceptions, but maybe you could run that down for us.
Yeah, only so my mindset behind that post was that, I mean, obviously the primary focus with the Blazers are kind of at the center of the NBA trade universe, given their contracts and kind of their underachieving record and their needs. Everybody's focused on, the Kevin Love, Blake Griffin type talk. And really, if we look at Neil Olshey's track record in Portland, he's always kind of targeted guys who might be on their rookie deal that are in a bad situation or being underutilized. And he targeted, that's a Maurice Harkless type guy, a Scalabissiere are the two examples I use, where he kind of targets and goes after those guys, and they're on controlled contracts. So they're still on their rookie deal. They go into restricted free agency. So it gives a team like Portland in a smaller market a lot more flexibility and build their roster. And really, if Portland does get to a point where they put a first round pick on the table in a bigger trade, it's going to be really crucial that they make those type of fringe moves to keep guys on salary to build your roster and fill it out. That being said, the three guys I talked about, only two of the three, or only one of the three, would qualify for the disabled player exception, which would be Torrey Craig, which the Blazers just played. He plays for the Nuggets. He's a defensive specialist. He routinely gets the assignment to guard Damian Lillard. He's on the final year of his deal. He makes $2 million. He's kind of the odd man out right now in the rotation in Denver. I think he's had single-digit minute totals in, I think, 4 out of his last 6 games. So that the Nuggets are definitely pivoting towards getting Michael Porter Jr. more minutes, and then that puts him behind Will Barton, Gary Harris, and Michael Porter Jr. now. So really, he's a guy I think that he could be acquired for a relatively reasonable price, and Portland has a history of working deals with Denver. Neil O'Shea does. So that's kind of what led me to that. But the other two guys I mentioned was DJ Wilson, who's was a first-round pick, selected 7 picks after Zach Collins in the 2017 NBA draft. Just kind of in a weird spot in Milwaukee. Budenholzer really likes Ersan Ilyasova.
Which makes no sense.
I think it just comes down to like floor spacing, and like really there's a lot of some things that Wilson does to a much lesser degree that Giannis Antetokounmpo does, and it really doesn't make sense for both those guys to be in the lineup at the same time. So he's a guy I think maybe if Portland can find a way to get him, it'd probably take a third team, because I think from what I've heard and kind of how Milwaukee's operated is they're probably going to want to be active in the buyout market in a couple months and looking for veterans. I mean, because they're on a title run. And so that could open up the window for him to be available. And then the last player I mentioned was Justin Jackson, which if I'm going to write a trade bus about modest trade pieces, I'm going to write about Justin Jackson. Ever since the Blazers called his name in 2017, he's someone who I could have been ours. I mean, Terry, you've sat with me at summer leagues and watched him play, and just, I routinely say that. So he's another guy, just a floor spacer. But these aren't like, the season-saving moves or, these big-time moves, but they're smart moves that Portland's going to have to make, especially if they start talking about putting draft assets in bigger trades.
And they're all young players, too. So they're all guys who came in at the same time as Zach Collins. So it's not, the veteran. The Blazers have veterans up and down the roster at this point. These are guys that you would expect possibly to build around in the future.
Yeah, I mean, Torrey Craig would be the oldest of the group. He's 28. Justin Jackson is 24, and I believe DJ Wilson is 23. So most of them are young.
Okay,
Torrey Craig kind of had old. Yeah, he had kind of an unorthodox path to the league, so he's a little bit up there in mileage.
Right. Well, he fits in with a lot of the Blazers, I guess, then, in that way. Dan, do you have thoughts on those guys?
I mean, I do, but I think the general idea that Steve's getting at here is the Blazers need reinforcements with size, length, athleticism, and multi-positional skill sets. That's something that's drastically evident right now as we look at this team. Everybody wonders why they can't get a stop or why the offense doesn't look right or this, that, and the other. And it's like, well, we're back to what we thought would be non-siloed players are now back to siloed players, where Melo needs the ball. Hassan needs somebody to feed him on a pick and roll. Like those. There's so many issues within this team. They need more guys who have roles that they can fill easily. Like with something that's going to stick out to me for a long time, probably for as long as I cover this team, is that the Blazers legitimately had Mario Hezonja and Anthony Tolliver playing center. And that was because of the holes and the gaps and the lack of size up and down the roster and the injuries. And obviously the injuries played the biggest part of that. But having guys with length and like, who's the shortest guy in that group, Steve?
It'd be Craig, but that's at 6'6", and he plays shooting guard and small forward. So,
yeah, like it's what I mean. Like, 6'6" that's like Portland's power forward right now. they're throwing out 6'1", 6'3", and 6'4" at the 1, 2, and 3. You got Jackson, who's 6'8". DJ's what, 6'9", 6'10"?
6'10", and he's got a 7'3" wingspan.
Yeah, so these guys they're significantly larger, cover more ground. They're a little bit more rangy, and I'm not trying to drag this out from the dead, but there was a certain impact that Amino and Harkless had, and just by range and size and how much ground they could cover. Portland is short on those kind of guys right now, and they do need to replenish those. And everybody's going to talk about what Portland's going to do with the Bazemore contract and what they're going to do with the Whiteside contract, and filling those things out. And while some people are still looking at this season as like some sort of like redemptive arc, these side moves are not about this season. They're about the complementary pieces that Portland's going to need to reinforce the top of the lineup, which we're seeing right now how thin things were behind the starters. And it's not necessarily a knock on the guys that are stepping into those places, but you're talking about like losing Zach Collins was enough to like drop this team down like 10, 12 wins because they had nothing behind him. And that's a scary proposition. And now that'll happen anytime when you talk about a star, like Damian Lillard goes down, or Steph Curry goes down, or James Harden goes down, or Giannis, or LeBron. If those guys go down, yeah, your season should get derailed. If your fourth, fifth guy goes down, you should struggle. You shouldn't get derailed. And that just kind of shows you where things are sitting right now. And these are the kind of moves that Portland really, really, really needs to consider. Not necessarily these exact ones, although I don't really mind any of these. I think they all make sense. It's all about what the compensation is. But these are the tell me if you agree or not here, Steve. These moves are going to happen after Portland makes the first real move with like the Whiteside contract.
Yeah, I think you have to kind of see what assets are involved in the bigger trade, because I mean, I'm really Portland. I think this is a topic we'll probably cover a little later, but just from how the roster is constructed, Portland cannot just let Whiteside expire and have him leave. Like, they need to do something with that money to get in a guy who has years. And I mean, this is what Dwight Jaynes is talking about. This is what Casey Holdall is talking about, or when he retweets James's piece, is like, they need somebody that has years on there, because how they're paying Dame and CJ really just ties them up to not really be able to go out and get a third piece in free agency, even if they, and Portland really doesn't have a history of doing that in free agency anyway. So it's crucial that they make that trade. And if they do that and they make a big trade that involves a draft pick, you really need to make sure you're going out and getting guys on competitive contracts. Otherwise you're sifting through, the bargain deals, and you're competing with, other teams for guys on minimum contracts and veterans on minimum contracts. And that's how you kind of end up with guys like Mario Hezonja and Anthony Tolliver, playing. I mean, they're, one injury away from a significant role on your team.
I want to back up about something that you brought up, and there has been a long time storyline about how the Blazers can't get players in free agency. And I know that historically that has been true. Last summer, or even before that, we have started to see players who were once offered contracts by the Blazers who turned them down, who are now coming back either as free agents or, happy to be traded here. With the leadership that Damian Lillard has shown, and also now with players looking around and seeing how Portland has welcomed Carmelo Anthony, I don't know that Blazers can yet bet on Portland being a free agent destination, but do you think it's possible that it could be less of an issue than it has been in the past?
I think I think there's a tier of players that Portland might have more access to. Like, I don't think that's the star level. I think just from Oregon, from a tax standpoint, I think is not very attractive to a lot of players. Mm-hmm. I think some of the demographics in Portland can be daunting to certain players until they've actually lived here. But I think, giving both two desperate parties signing Carmelo Anthony is one thing. And yes, I think that is good. And I think the one thing that does work in Portland's favor, and it's been a storyline that's been brought up in the NBA, is, and Adam Silver's expressed concern about it, is like, players, when they do these surveys, are saying, they're very unhappy in a lot of situations they are. And I don't know if that's the social media era that we're in, and, everybody's seeing how everybody else is interacting. They're just never satisfied with where they are, where it's like Portland's culture has kind of run counter to that. And like, really, I think there's probably a lot of teams that would be completely ripped apart right now if they were going through what the Blazers are going through right now. So I think there are certain guys where if it's a 50-50 decision, Portland in a situation where they might lose out on that player or have to drastically overpay for that player, they might be able to pick them up at a competitive rate. But I don't think Portland is all of a sudden going to become this massive destination. I mean, the guys that have come here are guys. I mean, Cantor was, not playing in New York and that saw an opportunity to play for a contender. Rodney Hood had to get traded here to actually kind of, buy into the system once he was here. So, and I think that does travel around the league, but I don't think that Portland's there yet. And I think there's a lot of factors that kind of hinder them in the open market, especially against some other teams.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I still don't think that changes. And again, the biggest prohibitor is obviously the demographics and taxes. As much as everybody sits here and says nice things about, hey, they signed Carmelo, they also look at the team right now and go, yeah, for all that goodwill and everything, like things aren't going too well for them right now. And whether that's fair or not, that's something that people talk about. I don't think it's going to get that much better, but honestly, I think one of the bigger things here, more than anything else, is something Portland didn't really control, and that's who Yusuf Nurkic signed as an agent. Yusuf Nurkic is, Nurk's with Clutch now. He's Rich Paul. That's LeBron James. And if the Blazers take care of Yusuf Nurkic and his guys and his contract and those kind of things, that probably greases the wheels a little bit at Clutch. And maybe if there's a Clutch client that becomes a free agent, maybe perhaps Portland becomes a destination in that sense. More than anything, outside of the players, I would say the largest impact are what agents have to say and what relationships they have right now. And if you get a positive relationship, like take a look at who Portland signed and dealt with over the last 7 years. They're Mark Bartelstein clients. Yeah,
and how they handle the Jake Layman situation is, textbook example of building goodwill.
Well, and so I want to interject here. The thing that I get the Whiteside discussion that we've just had. I worry about some of the non-basketball implications if the Blazers were to trade Kent Bazemore, and maybe this is just my soft and squishy heart, but the media, the storylines, the team has talked so much about Kent Bazemore and his family coming here and being so happy here, and being able to come out of a situation that wasn't working anymore in Atlanta. There's a lot of goodwill for his family here in the Pacific Northwest, and I wonder how. I mean, everybody knew he was traded on in the last year of his contract, so it's possible that things could change. But do you think that trading Kent Bazemore halfway through the season could somehow make people look somewhat unfavorably on Portland? Like, wow, they moved the guy and then just moved him on, even though he said he was so happy there.
Who are we talking about making unhappy? Are we talking about fans or are we talking about players?
Well,
I think that's the question.
I'm talking about him. Do you think? I mean, I think
if he gets traded.
Happy.
Well, here's the thing: if he gets traded, there's a likelihood that he was told that upon the deal being, put through. Mm-hmm. When he was swapped for Evan. A lot of these deals aren't done without talking to the players first.
Right. So at least brought in and said, we got a lot going on. You are in the last year of your contract, so it's entirely possible that you could be moved in the second half of the season.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's what happened to Rodney Hood when he went to Cleveland. And I guess it's because of the narratives that both of those guys that have been pushed about them and their families and moving their families. Like with Rodney Hood, he didn't move his family out here originally because they'd had to move in the middle of the year, with Cleveland.
The year previous, yeah.
And, I'm just looking at it from the point of view, I'm still kind of stuck on hey, maybe Portland isn't always going to be a place that's not considered a great destination, at least while people have Damian Lillard here. When people want to come to play with Damian Lillard, maybe they are okay with the rest of the stuff because it's not for the rest of their life, but it's, the opportunity to play with somebody like him and to play with a team with a locker room full of guys that are keeping it together during this period, which could really be tough on a lot of locker rooms.
I think one thing I want to touch on, though, is like, if you're a player in Bazemore's situation where you've been in the league for a while, you came up as an undrafted player, and you've seen, every tier of the NBA hierarchy. If you're a guy, a veteran that, probably isn't living up to his contract figure, I mean, that's no fault of his own. I mean, you signed that deal. But if you're on an expiring deal for $19 million and you don't expect a trade, or you don't think a trade's a possibility, that's on you. Like, you should know that.
The only guys that doesn't happen to are the top 10 guys in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's basically the deal.
Fair. That's fair.
And really, it's like, and the Rodney Hood thing is a great story, and I think it's something that I mentioned right after his injury happened. Like, I am super leery of, like, as a fan, yes, I want players to take discounts and stay in Portland, but like, if a guy is only on his rookie deal and he's turning down a lot of money, like, as a fan of these guys and what they're trying to do and their earning potential at this age, like, I do not root for guys to take discounts if they have not been paid previously, like, especially if it's significant. Like, if it's, a matter of a few $1 million or very close, then yeah, I would love them to stay in Portland. But these guys got to go. They have to maximize their earning potential while they're still young.
Get the bag.
Yep, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys remember if last year on December 15th there was a Woj and Zach Lowe special? Is that new this year?
No, there was. But it was, again, it focused, I think, on the Blazers weren't really involved in that at that point in time.
So we weren't paying as much attention.
Yeah, and it kind of fizzled. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a whole lot in it. Obviously, this one, the main focus for Portland was, surprise, surprise, Kevin Love.
Okay, so how likely do y'all really think that is going to happen? Because so here's what I've said. I've said if Kevin Love comes to Portland, I will welcome him because he will be a Blazer, and I am not going to complain. I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure that he feels like he is welcome by the fan base to this organization. But I just don't think that's going to happen, and only for the reason that how often do the Blazers do the thing that everybody thinks that they're going to do?
I mean,
not 2 years later. Like,
I'd say fairly often, though, as far as when they really signal it.
Well, they were going to get Hassan Whiteside in 2016, and they got him in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, I just.
Here's the thing: this is Woj and Lowe, not Joe and Schmo.
Yeah.
They're the two most plugged in people to Neil O'Shea they have that exist in the NBA. So they're not saying that for nothing. Could it be all part of a smokescreen? Certainly. I hope so. But from everything I've gathered and everything I understand, the likelihood of a deal for any particular person seems to fall on Kevin Love the most. There's certainly other guys that are out there. And the one thing that remains the same, Kevin Love's injury concerns are a problem. And for everybody else out there, like, wondering what the situation is in Cleveland, Kevin Love has been trying to force his way out for a year.
I mean,
and it's
how
become
much of his injuries last season were just like, we're trying to shut things down.
I mean, it's not just the fact that it's like a injury. It's multiple different versions of injuries. That's the problem. Like, it's his back, it's his shoulder, it's his ankle, it's his, there's a litany of injuries. And the same is true of Blake Griffin. And if anything, I think the Blazers probably a little more reticent to commit anything to anybody right now, particularly with how bad their injury luck has been.
Right. And Neil O'Shea recently did say, I think it was with his Jason Quick wrote about the Q&A and his on The Athletic. Neil O'Shea said that they were going to basically stay the course. They weren't going to do anything super dramatic. Of course, I always like whatever he says. I always think the opposite is probably what's going to happen because every time he says it's going to be quiet, something big happens. Every time he says they're going to be splashy, nothing happens.
There's nothing to gain from saying that they're going to make a trade.
Mm-hmm.
And like he in that same
signing
thing, he
Kevin
said,
Love, is that keeping them? Is that what they plan? Was that going to be the plan at the beginning of the year anyway? And
I believe
injuries haven't changed that. Is that kind of what you're getting at? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the same. Like in that same article, Neil Olshey said his starting lineup next year, if it's Dame, CJ, Rodney Hood, Zach Collins, and Yusuf Nurkic, just like he planned it. Well, here's the thing: Rodney Hood's not going to be in this. Well, okay, what I can tell you what, Rodney Hood's not going to be in that starting lineup next year, anyways. Mm-hmm. So, how much can you believe of that? It's GM speak. He shouldn't say anything else. He shouldn't be like, yeah, no, we're going to be extra aggressive at the trade deadline. That just puts pressure on you to get a deal done, and now other teams are going to try to drive the price up because of public perception.
Steve, do you think going after Kevin Love falls in line with the Blazers sticking with the plan?
No, I think the plan was when they consolidated the contracts into Whiteside's deal. I think it was a clear signal that they were going to make a move for a player that had years left on their contract. Mm-hmm. And really like getting to the signaling point of this and the messaging that's coming out. Like the last time I was on here, and it's just something that Dan talks about all the time, is the appearance of desperation. And Portland cannot come in and be like, we really need this guy, because also in The Athletic, Jason Lloyd, who's a Cleveland-based reporter, he had an article basically like Cleveland has really had a rude awakening to what the trade market is for Kevin Love. Like they were asking for a first-round pick, and teams are asking for a first-round pick from them, which, I really hope at some point Memphis and Cleveland start having a conversation about trades, and there's just a huge confusion on who's giving up a first-round pick because Memphis is real good at that.
Yeah.
So.
Oh my God! I thought it was your first-round pick. Your first-round pick. Which first-round pick are we talking about? Oh my God!
Meanwhile, somewhere Hollinger is like, "You son of a."
And Dylan Brooks and the other Brooks are out there laughing. Oh my God, that's so funny.
But I hope those two guys pop a bottle of champagne once a year on that date.
It's one of my favorite trade stories.
My gosh. Yeah.
But I think Cleveland is having a rude awakening with, it's getting to what Dan's saying. The injury history is very real for Kevin Love. The length of his contract is a serious problem, for teams, especially if you're going to be giving up a first round pick. And so I think Portland probably, they have to say the stay the course message, because that market for Kevin Love has to be driven down. And if you're looking at his behavior right now in Cleveland between him and Tristan Thompson, it is very clear. Like those guys are like Tristan Thompson, especially, like they're bordering on probably getting asked to go, hey, why don't you not show up at the facility today?
Yeah.
So like
I thought Tristan Thompson is supporting the coach. I thought he's the only one supporting the coach.
No, he's supporting the coach in a sense, but let me just go ahead and kind of frame this up so everybody who doesn't know knows. There are some of the young guys who definitely are against Beeline, but there are also some veterans that are against some of the young guys. And there's this friction that's kind of going on between. You can see the meltdown between Tristan Thompson yelling at Beeline to tell Sexton to pass the damn ball. Mm-hmm. Love is just trying to
get somebody to pass him the ball.
No.
He's the one who's standing in the defensive in the key with his hand.
Like he's Chris Pauling himself. Yeah. Like he's looking at the ref saying, "Look, I'm doing something wrong."
Yeah, all this on me. Yeah. And the Love is doing this. He was doing it subtly. Like it wasn't like full on mutiny or subterfuge. Then he was kind of linked to the article that came out from The Athletic in Cleveland, where he was one of the guys that was bashing Beeline. Now, I've got it on good authority that Tristan Thompson wants to stay in Cleveland long term. Mm-hmm. So I think Tristan's trying to both be good soldier and friend of Love, but also at the same time kind of not ruffle too many feathers.
So
Love wants out.
Okay.
That's the bottom line. Love wants out, but he also saw how badly AD got portrayed.
Mm-hmm.
in trade demand.
So to wrap this part of the conversation up, even with the injury concerns, you kind of asked me a similar question of a few weeks ago, Dan. Like, when is the point where the Blazers are going to be like, we have to make a move now?
Hey, I'm Jason Del Rey. I recently wrapped up Land of the Giants, The Rise of Amazon. In this podcast, we examine how Jeff Bezos turned a small online bookseller into one of the most powerful companies in the world. We start by exploring how Amazon Prime became a service with over 100 million members and the main source of the company's power.
I mean, I think that's kind of what Amazon's banking on, right? That you're just so locked in that you're going to go to any other sites, because, I mean, I don't.
And we end the season by pondering the question, is Amazon too big?
You know, and we just don't want to be the United States of Amazon. We just really don't.
Land of the Giants has been recommended by the New York Times, Axios, Wired, and more. It's a candid look at the state of Amazon today, how we got here, and what the future might look like. The entire first season is out now. Find out more and binge it on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app.
Like, do they wait all the way up until the trade deadline? Is there a situation, like, I'm looking at the games that they have coming up: Phoenix, Golden State, Orlando, Minnesota, and New Orleans. And I kind of feel like if they do bad in that stretch, they're going to have to do something just to keep their sanity for the rest of the year. But when do you think, since you think that this big trade is going to happen, when do you think it's most likely to occur?
I think if I had to pick a date, it's when they get back from that 5-game road trip at the turn of the new year. They go on the road to at New York, at Washington, Miami, Toronto, Minnesota.
New Year's Day in New York in an early game.
Yeah.
That's so mean.
Okay, let's say that in that trip they go 2-3 or 1-4. Which, I mean, the Wizards don't play any damn defense, but they score 150 a night. Like, that's not going to be an easy game to win. Then you've got the Heat, who, holy crap, are they playing well? Toronto, yeah, that went well for Portland last time. And then the Timberwolves, and they feature a team in Cat. You know, we'll get to see Portland play up against them next week for the first time. Cat's gonna be a tough guy to stop. So if they get throttled on that trip and then come home, the first game back is against the Bucks.
I guess a question more a different question would be like, why would they do it sooner rather than later, or why would they do it later rather than sooner? Like, why if they're gonna make this move, why would they wait? Is it because they're trying to like get
leverage
Cleveland? Okay.
Yeah, you gotta see. You'd have to see how the market gets set.
Yeah, it's entirely leverage.
And I think for me, like the thing I'm watching for is, and not necessarily for Portland, I don't want to make Dan's head explode, but like the guy I'm watching is Andre Iguodala.
Oh,
like I think that's the guy who could set you're going to get a better idea of what the trade market could look like depending on how he's pursued and how far, how much the Grizzlies are willing to entertain if it's not a first round offering, or if they do get a first round offering from someone. Like, I think that's going to be a big indicator on how the market's going to get set for the rest of the trade season.
Someone else, not Portland, right? Because I've seen people talk about him coming to Portland, and what I can't figure out, like, what would be the point of that?
There's no world where that is a good idea for Portland to give up assets for Iguodala, even if it included Crowder. It's not a good idea for them. Mm-hmm. But it's actually, I think it's good that you brought up Iguodala, because he's a guy I think probably gets moved last. I think that's a guy that Memphis holds on to up until the very last second to see what they can pry from any of those competing teams.
So
yeah, and I mean that's
Steve,
well, no, that's kind of what I'm getting at though. Is like, I think Iguodala is important to watch to see how the market gets set. Yeah. Like, is someone going to come after him, and is Memphis going to entertain it? Because I think teams will still call about him, but they're not going to give him up what they want, because they're going to dare Memphis to buy him out or release him. Mm-hmm. And because that's how teams want to pursue him. So if some team does offer up a trade package for him, that's going to be a huge indicator for how the rest of the trades are going to roll out for the rest of the trade season, is what I'm getting at. Like, I'm not saying I'm not saying he's one of the first ones to come. Like, I think if
You're
someone
just
does
saying
offer
activity.
it, what the level of interest is there. And like
Okay.
if he does come off the board early, you're looking at a very unfriendly trade market for the Blazers.
Yes, that's I think that's very poignant. And
Say that again. If
If he came off the
Iguodala
market early.
gets traded early, sorry, go
That
ahead.
that means buyers are like sellers are getting rewarded. And right now, Portland being a theoretical buyer, if the market's skewed towards sellers, like that is not a good sign for Portland for the rest of the trade season, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And here's the thing. Like everybody worried about or putting together trade packages that include Simons and Collins going out for anybody less than Paul George or Giannis. Just stop. Like the Blazers, okay, the guys that are being called on or that are asked to be included in packages right now in no particular order are CJ, Simons, Collins, and Nurkic. Of those guys, the most likely in my mind to be traded is CJ. I don't think Portland. I would put it at CJ, at Collins, then Simons, then Nurkic. I think Nurkic is probably outside of Dame, the least likely guy to be traded on this team, and it's because his skill set is so perfect with Dame, but also it's elevated even more because of how good his contract is. So Portland, I think the most they will give up for a Love type ends up being the Whiteside deal, maybe that first round pick or Nasir Little. Like I don't think it's going to be much more than that.
And that pick would probably most likely be protected, is what I would assume.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like that's why they're trying to drive that market down for him. As good as Kevin Love is as a player, he's still a very big deal money-wise, and it has a lot of years remaining. I mean, look at what the Clippers got for Blake Griffin. Was that a haul? I don't think so.
No. They had instant buyer's remorse with that Supermax.
Yeah, and you're talking about Blake Griffin, who is younger, and even though he has obviously the history of knee injuries, was a significantly higher level contributor and younger. And so all of a sudden you're looking at Kevin Love, who's much in the same position, although not quite as much money, but it's the same level, I think, of what's it going to cost to move this deal. Yeah, I don't think the return's going to be that great.
Well, I'm. If you guys are ready, I'm ready to move from hypotheticals to actual basketball that we have been watching and games that we have coming up. I don't know how much battery I have left on my laptop right now, so I feel like we should go ahead and move on. Any last words on the trades?
I think it's going to be. I think we're going to have to wait for someone to break the dam and get this thing rolling. Like I think once it happens, a lot's going to happen all at once. I know that's an easy thing to say, but like there's just because it's December 15th, I don't think we can I don't think you should just bank on there being a bunch of trades right away.
I need Maury Griffin. I need Maury and Griffin to start getting busy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we need here. The wheelers and dealers to go ahead and break the seal and get it going.
And really just going back to like you brought it up earlier, Tara, is like I think one of the reasons why there was like the Woj low show got a lot more coverage this year and people have talked a lot more is just because there was so much changeover last summer that all these guys are finally trade eligible, which usually we don't see. So now it's like you just have a massive slump or a huge group of guys that are now available for trade.
That was a Freudian slip there, huh? Massive slump.
Yeah, I know. That year, that season.
All right. Well, it sounds like y'all are ready to move on.
Mm-hmm.
So I have been watching Hassan Whiteside, and it looks to me like he seems like he's getting maybe more comfortable, maybe more used to Damian Lillard, or maybe Damian Lillard is getting more comfortable to him. I'm seeing more successful pick and rolls. I don't know why Hassan doesn't go all the way to the hoop. He has to stop and toss it in, but they're going in, so I'm not going to complain. What do you guys have you guys seen any change in his apparent comfort level or how things are going with him lately?
Yeah, he's been a bit better in the pick and roll, particularly like actually rolling. Like that's like a crucial part of that.
And it's like a weird roll because it's like a lot like he doesn't charge
it's a short
ahead.
Roll.
Yeah,
no, it's a short roll
he's
that
like
he
either
pulls up
even
for that
with,
little floater.
sometimes even slightly behind. But he's doing it.
Yeah, and like his effectiveness is pretty decent, which again I think leads to like the frustration of people in that it's like, yeah, you're good at this. How about you do it harder and more frequently, dude? Because if you look at his like points per possession as a roll man, he's in like the top like 5%, I think, last time I checked. He's almost at like 1.2 points per possession, which is really good. Especially when you're talking about a guy where like literally a third of his possessions come out of the pick and roll as the roll man. And it's like, can we just like do this more frequently, like with more effort? And I think that was my feeling more towards the beginning of the season. And now I'm just like, okay, that's good. Now a little bit more, And I think part of it has to do with health, but I think the other part of it is like the Portland's offense right now, because of the injuries, because of the integrating new guys, but there's so many different things on so many different levels. The offense just looks stupidly clunky. Like it just looks really bad. And the saving grace is that you have Damian Lillard, pick and roll maestro, who, by the way, leads the league in pick and roll points as the ball handler. It's I think it's
but
nice
Damian's
to see
not
Whiteside
scoring as much as he was at the beginning of the season.
He's still second or third in total possessions in the pick and roll, and he leads the league in points per possession.
In pick and roll or in all?
Yes.
Okay, in pick and roll.
Pick and roll, and he's he's first in isolation points per possession, and he's behind, I think he's fourth or fifth in total isolations. So Damian Lillard's still God tier. And all of a sudden you get getting some contributions from Hassan Whiteside, and I think it helps a little bit, but here's the quote unquote problem. And this is like what I call it, this is why Yusuf Nurkic is so important. When Whiteside catches on the roll, it's going up. And so you aren't necessarily getting defensive rotations, or you're getting defensive rotations where
they just close out on him because they know that he's shooting it. Yeah, and
you don't have somebody coming in. Yeah, you don't have somebody coming in from the weak side to rebound because they're trying to step out and stretch the floor, or they're smaller. So like if Nas is on the floor, sure, you've got maybe some offensive rebound help, and you can clean some of those things up, and you can see how Portland struggles as a rebounding team. Even on these longer shots from their bigs, there's not a lot of size around to rebound, longer rebounds. So there's a lot of different things that are going on, but I would say that Whiteside's certainly doing better, and his numbers look pretty damn decent. Like he's shooting 62%.
I feel like he's making an impact on the game. Like they're still not necessarily winning. They just don't have enough. They don't have enough continuity in the lineup because it changes like every few days. They just don't have necessarily enough firepower. But I feel like over the last couple of weeks, he's doing what he can. I
feel like there's really no way to say this without sounding a jerk. I feel like the offense is too predictable because they have to accommodate a guy like Hassan Whiteside and Carmelo Anthony. Because what they need to be effective is very, very simple. And there hasn't been a lot of variation to what they do. Like Hassan White, I hate comparing him to Nurkic because they're two totally different players. But like Nurk, when he catches on a roll, can shoot, he can continue driving, or he can pass. When Whiteside gets it, it's going up. And so it allows you to be a certain way, like defensively within your shell, how you play those things. When Carmelo gets the ball now on the wing, he's become a little bit more like Carmelo of old, where it's a little bit more isolation and defense is loaded up against him, and less of the like 3-5 game stretch where we saw him moving the ball a little more effectively. And so again, I think it becomes more predictable. And when you put Dame and CJ in situations where defenses are loading up behind it, even when those guys are being productive, like we saw from Hassan Whiteside against Denver, I know it's going to sound weird to say this because he had 33 points, but did it really feel like he had 33 points? Let's put it this way.
It felt like he was doing everything he could.
See, I felt like he was. That's a different question. I don't think that his impact was felt as much as it should have been.
Steve, what do you think?
Does that make sense?
Well, I struggle with it too, Dan. I'm not trying to be like, I'm not like arguing with you. I'm struggling with you because when I watch Whiteside, like, I want him to know that the team needs him to do some specific things, and if he does them well, they'll be in a better place. But I'm just not convinced that he's doing those quite yet. I'm sorry, Steve, I interrupted you.
No, you're fine. I think as far as like the nuts and bolts, as far as like some of the stuff he's doing differently in pick and rolls is like, to start the year, he was slipping almost all the screens he was in. And now when he does, like, it really messed with Jokic and getting Jokic in space when he did slip screens. So now like those are getting mixed in, which he's definitely more comfortable slipping screens than actually making screens. So like when he's doing that, now it catches defenses off guard. But like Dan said, he gets the ball and it's the short roll, it's stopping early, and it's that flip shot. I think the Denver game was so weird because, you know, he goes scoreless in the second quarter and still ends up with 33 points. And like there really was like a point in that third quarter where I had something I hadn't said all season, where it's like they needed to go to Whiteside more in that quarter, which I know is like it's very counterintuitive, and you want Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum taking more shots, but like Denver has defenders built to guard Portland's backcourt now when they're healthy, and so I just felt like they could have
because Whiteside was making them, like, you know, I mean, it's like how many nights have we sat and watched the Blazers watch somebody on the other team who nobody had heard of until 2 weeks before, like, go off for 35 points, and it felt like that was finally the Blazers were doing it to somebody else.
Yeah, and like I completely agree with that, but I also just like the thing that is frustrating, and Dan touched on it, and I'm a pretty harsh critic, so I might not be the best person to ask when it comes to Whiteside, but like when you see the potential of what he can do, it makes you want it all the time. Mm-hmm. And it's just that even effort that it has gotten better. It's gotten so much better in the last couple of weeks, and hopefully that continues, especially going into trade season. But like I just really feel like those mental vacations that sometimes occur, whether that's foul trouble or hunting blocks on a guy that's already guarded and leaving your man wide open in the dunker spot, like that stuff's got to stop, because Portland, like we've talked about and you guys have talked about, is there's zero margin for error right now with this team. And so you got to do those little things.
Hassan, if you're listening, your team needs you. You can do this. I believe in you, buddy. That was just that's between me and Hassan. Okay. Real quick, what do you guys think about the Whiteside-Labissiere lineup? I know it wasn't pretty. My question is, do you think it could be useful down the road if it gets better?
It was okay against the Knicks. I mean, but then again, like, there's not much you can throw out there. It's not going to be okay against the Knicks. But again, like anything else, anytime you're integrating new players or players who literally hadn't played with each other before the game before, there's going to be some hesitation. But like when you're playing against a team like Denver and you don't have size, you need to manufacture ways to get size. And this is kind of what it goes back to the whole idea of like Portland needing guys like Torrey Craig and Josh Jackson and DJ Wilson, these 6'6", 6'8", 6'10" dudes who play the 3-4 because Portland, if they take Whiteside off the floor, the only option they have is Scal. Like after that, it's 6'8" or smaller. And if we're talking about 6'8", we're only talking about Tolliver and maybe Hazonia. After that, he gets real short.
Well, so that's what confuses me a little bit. We're going back to the trading stuff. If the Blazers trade away Hassan Whiteside, who's their center, that leaves Scal and, Yusuf Nurkic when he comes back, and who knows, how game ready he's going to be. Like, when the Blazers trade Hassan Whiteside, what are they going to do about the center position?
Whoever they trade for is going to fill in that spot. minutes.
Or
They'll
Realistically,
just get a power forward. The Blazers will be like the next Knicks West and have like 3 or 4 power forwards.
Pretty much, yeah. Like, here's the thing: like, if they're moving for somebody like Kevin Love right now is currently 11th in the league in rebounding. Mm-hmm. Like, if they went way outside the box and got like baby Sabonis, he's averaging 14 rebounds a game. Mm-hmm. Like, there's certainly options that are out there that they could move for.
Okay. So that's the kind of person that you're thinking. I mean, last week you were talking Harrison Barnes.
Yeah, I think that's more the Bazemore deal. If the Bazemore deal got moved, it would be a guy like Harrison.
Okay. Sorry, Steve. What were you saying?
Well, no, I think the other possibility too is, I mean, Portland's made it a point to keep an extra additional roster spot open, and you can always tack in, another big man. Like, teams usually carry, unless you're the Blazers, carry big men that can actually play basketball. So deep on their bench. so I mean, look, Pau Gasol is retired. So like, teams use their 14, 15 spot with big men that can play traditional minutes at the center position. So like, getting another guy in a trade is not out of the question, especially when you have that additional roster spot. As far as the Hassan Whiteside pairing, like, it was just appalling how bad the rebounding was Denver had 15 offensive rebounds, and it's just like, you had 2 7-footers out there. I just don't understand how they weren't getting to those boards. And like,
do you think they were deferring to each other? They didn't have Carmelo out there yelling, coming in for him himself, or like, I was really puzzled. I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working.
And really, it's like, Portland can't do that. Like, when Portland's defense is actually getting stops, you cannot give the other team more chances. So I don't know. I mean, installing 2 turnstiles next to each other didn't prevent theft in New York subways, and I don't know if that's necessarily the best idea for Portland's front court.
Okay, I got one more question about the basketball I'm seeing. Kent Bazemore inserted into the starting lineup now for Rodney Hood. Kent Bazemore was used to being a starter in Atlanta, so this isn't like new territory for him by any means. I saw him run some plays that looked familiar to me, that looked a little bit like Mo Harkless, things that he used to do. I was wondering if you guys saw something similar.
They're trying to be a bit inventive with some things that they run on backdoor cuts, things of that nature. Because of Bazemore's ability to knock down corner threes, he's going to be in a lot of the same situations that Harkless was in. Mm-hmm. As far as like where he's going to get the ball and where the shot opportunities are going to come from. And so those baseline cuts, the catch and shoot threes in the corner, the attacks on the closeouts in the corner, those are all going to be things that are going to be there for him. The flip side of it is like, how good has Bazemore really been as a starter? I think is a bit more mixed than anything else. I don't know. What have you taken away from it so far, Steve?
I mean, 0 3-pointers in his last 2 games, and really the floor spacing just hasn't quite translated. Now, Nate had an excellent article this last week about, in theory, putting Bazemore in more catch and shoot situations is a winning proposition for him, because the pull-up game hasn't really been there for him this year. Mm-hmm. And really, it's just integrating him into those spots. Defensively, I think he can do a lot. He's undersized, compared to where Harkless was. So I think it's a little more physically taxing and can wear him down a little bit, I think. But offensively, I think it's just getting in that rhythm, and I think he can thrive in that. Like you're saying, he's doing the baseline cuts. He can attack guys from the corner, and that's just what he's got to do. But really, I mean, it's still, Portland has had to experiment with so many different lineups this year. It's going to take a while for it to start making sense and start working.
And here's the thing, like, and this isn't me being like Debbie Downer. I saw somebody say the other day, and it's like, I'm not being a downer and saying things aren't going well. That's what's happening out on the floor. And the likelihood of those lineups somehow coming together over a period of time and just magically becoming better aren't all that great. And they may not come together. And I think that's kind of the situation that Portland finds themselves in, and why these deals that we're looking at, these tertiary deals, the bigger deals, these improvements from Whiteside, Melo playing better, how it really hasn't added up to much difference. And it's not likely to add up to much difference until Portland gets healthy and gets the reinforcements that they need coming via the trade deadline.
You got to think that they are in a point where they want to at least be able to win the ones they should. And like this week is the perfect opportunity for them to show that they're there. Whether or not they can do it, I don't know. Because like you said, they've been dealing with so much. But coming up, they have Phoenix.
I want to ask you that.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's perfect. Like, I want to ask you this. This is gonna post before the Phoenix game. They've got Phoenix, Golden State, Orlando, Minnesota, New Orleans. They're gonna come home after this Phoenix game, and they're gonna have 4 at home. Of these 5 games, legitimately, how many do you think that Portland in their head are thinking that they can win?
Well, they're thinking that they can win 5 of them. I mean, those guys don't ever think that there's not a game that they couldn't win.
Okay,
so what did you really want to ask?
From the outside looking in, how many of these games do you think that they could realistically, not well, something could go right, and then, no, realistically, how many of these 5 games should they win?
I would say I would like them to win. Well, I also think they could win all 5 of them. I think.
See, that's what I'm talking about. Your blind optimism.
I
damn
think
it!
They should win 3 of them at least.
Which 3? Golden State's the given. What are the other 2?
Oh, now you're talking about the most likely scenario, and I don't go into the most likely scenario. I'm just saying 3 of 5.
That's why I framed it that way.
I'm just saying 3 of 5.
Because here's the thing.
Ask Steve.
Outside of the Warriors
game. I defer
game,
to Steve.
Like outside of the Warriors game, I don't think they'll be favored. I'm looking at this. I don't think they'll be favored against Orlando.
What about New Orleans? They'll be favored over New Orleans.
Yeah, you're right. New Orleans, they will be favored against.
Well, Minnesota's in a tailspin right now.
Yeah, what happened to Minnesota? They started off so good.
No, you went like full Minnesota there for a split second.
I know.
So
I know. Poor Jake.
Minnesota.
It's because Jake hurt his toe.
Oh my God, you do that too well.
If I hear a wood chipper going in the background, I'm so concerned.
Well, we should wrap this up soon then.
Oh man, like I don't know how well they'll get through this. Now they certainly need it, and they certainly would take it, but I don't know if their style and consistency and level of play is deserving of anything more than 2.
I think they very well could win all 5. I think if they win 1, that's really, really, really bad. If they win 2, it's like, ugh. If they win 3, it's like, okay, I can live with that. That's kind of how I feel.
That's the crazy thing is if you look at this, if they win 3 of 2 or 3 of 5, they're going to pick up a game.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was doing the math the other day, and for everything that I can gather, the 8 seed's probably going to be anywhere from like high 37 to low 39 wins. And for Portland to get to 39 wins, they need to win 29 of 56. That's a significantly better winning percentage than anything that they've been able to demonstrate thus far.
Mm-hmm. Well, they've got a tough road to hoe. Is that how you say it? Steve, what do you think of those 5 games? Phoenix, Golden State, Orlando, Minnesota, and New Orleans. How many of them do you think they will win?
I think a couple days off, being in Phoenix, I think that's the one I really worry about. But I mean, Golden State's a gimme. Orlando is going through a few issues. I think 3 sounds right. I mean, New Orleans is, I mean, I feel bad for those guys. I mean, we watch a lot of summer league games with those guys, and watching the optimism, decrease so much has been wild to watch, because they worship the ground David Griffin walked on, and now it's like that relationship is already souring.
I know. I got sucked into all their optimism.
Yeah, well, let's put your faith in Lonzo Ball, and that's what happens.
Yeah. Well,
so
I think
3.
I'm thinking 3. 3 would be my guess.
3.
as far as the rest of the year goes, I think like we're getting to this point where it's like, and Dame's talked about it, is like, this is a team that has been in the hole. Like they've never, I wrote an article about this a couple weeks ago, but they've never quite been in a hole like this with Stotts and Lillard. And it's going to be dicey. And I mean, this is not a team that, I mean, unless Yusuf Nurkic hits the ground running after being out for a year, it's such an uphill climb, especially in the back half of the season.
I would just like the changes to stop for a while. And I mean, that's injuries, basically. I mean, I know that that's really out of my control, but I just think that they haven't had a chance to like get themselves squared away to understand really who they are yet. And I just hope that they have a little bit of a chance for that to happen.
As someone who's
no, go ahead, Steve.
As someone who's trying to build a draft board for guys I need to write profiles on, this is going to be the craziest year for me, because it's like I am not where I thought I was going to be in the summer, obviously, and now it's like, I don't know.
You don't know where the Blazers are going to be either.
Yeah, I don't know where the Blazers are going to be, and it's just...
They could be realistically... Well, I mean, they could be picking between 4 and 16 right now.
Yeah, exactly. So
like it's so volatile. And of course, the year that the likelihood of them, you know, quote unquote tanking, or as I called it the other day, retreating, is the year that there's like 2 wings in the entire draft. So it's a little frustrating to say the least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we shall see. But guys, my laptop is just about ready to go, so we're gonna have to wrap it up here.
All right.
Any last words of wisdom before we sign off?
So, if you were looking for wisdom, you had the wrong guest.
Wrong podcast.
Yeah, no kidding. Honestly, I just want this thing to be decided one way or the other. And we've gotten like the first messaging from the organization that they may, well, not tank, they may not be chasing anything this season. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the first step. Like, it sounds terrible, but like there are steps to, the grieving process here. And I think that the organization is going through them, and whether they make a deal in the next week that somehow gets them the 8th, 7th seed and they're a sacrificial lamb to the Lakers or Clippers, whatever. But if they're not going to do that, and they're going to wait it out to the deadline and just start focusing on development and those kind of things, let's just get that started. Because I think there's only so many different ways every single night after a game I can say this team sucks, and I don't like doing that. I genuinely don't like. But if the messaging changes to, this season isn't what we're focusing on right now, it's the future, then it's very easy for all of us to go.
Why are you waiting for them to say it? Why can't you just decide that's what you think is happening?
Because it has to be said. Every organization has to say it. Otherwise, you're going to get the pushback from it. Like the Warriors came out.
You could say you're not going to push back, and you're just going to watch and see what happens. I'm just very curious about why you think that what does it have to do with you that they need to say it? Can't you see what's happening?
Certainly, but there's ways that these things will be pushed back against.
By whom?
I think just for like a Stotts standpoint, it'd be beneficial for the organization to at least kind of say, hey, we're targeting development and staying healthy and gearing up for next year. Like that tactful retreat that Dan talked about.
Right.
Like,
okay.
Because I think that takes heat off Terry Stotts, because right now, it's all systems go, we're trying to win right now, and you continually start losing, that's when the temperature starts getting heated up on coaches. And if you make a different message, that's how guys like Brett Brown and Kenny Atkinson last a long time through losing streaks. Is because
yes, that's a perfect example.
The organization has excused the losses,
okay,
and that's something I think. That's the main reason I want to hear the organization kind of say something like that, because it all comes down to Terry Stotts for me, and just keeping the integrity and just making sure Portland knows, and the fans know, and the league knows that that's still their guy. And this is not,
this isn't time to come fill for our coach.
Exactly.
I see. I get that. I guess I was looking at it from the point of like, I see what's happening, but when you're talking about looking at the bigger picture in terms of like the coach and the organization,
it's internal versus external messaging,
right?
Like what signals you're putting out to people,
because I don't want anything to happen to Terry Stotts. That's for sure.
Yeah,
yes.
I will defend that.
That is for sure. Okay, well, I think let's go ahead and wrap it up here. Steve, why don't you tell people, like, got anything you're working on you want to share? Or I guess you got your draft board.
Yeah, it's a large draft board.
Any teams that we should be watching now that the college season is kicking up?
The guys I'm watching aren't necessarily playing domestically. So I'm you want to be watching Australian guys or guys playing in the Australian League, and then guys playing in Euro League, specifically in Israel. So those are the guys I'm watching. But I'll start narrowing that down. But I would expect that I will continue to kind of look at some of, like, what interests me now is a lot like the article we saw from me that came out yesterday on Saturday, is kind of just looking at those little moves that O'Shea likes to make that really interest me, where you can find a diamond in the rough. And that's what I really am focused on right now. But you can find me on Twitter at Steve D Hoops. My features every Saturday, and I'm usually popping in and out of there when something comes up.
All right. How about you, Dan?
As always, you can find me on social media at Danny Marang. And after every game with Joe Simons and myself on NBC Sports Northwest, that we still got a few more games at the Rialto. I believe the 26th is our last night there. So if you want to come down and catch a game with Joe and I, we've had plenty of people come down. We've had plenty of intoxicated people walk through the set. Please don't do that anymore. That's not okay.
Like just walk right in front of you while the show.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's the first time it's funny. The second time it's like, okay. The third time you're like, I'm gonna no, you need to go.
They have a big spotlight on you.
We do, but people
that still doesn't work.
No, there's alcohol in abundance. So
the patrons of the Rialto are much like moths.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to put it. But it has been a blast, as it was last year. We love going out there. The owner takes good care of us, and it's awesome to have people just come up, just start talking hoop with us. So if you want to catch a game, Joe and I will be there every game between now and the 26th, I believe, is our last night. So that's all I got. Why don't you take us out of here, Tara?
All right. Well, you can find Blazers Edge at Blazers Edge on Twitter. You can follow the Blazers Edge podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You can find me at TCB Biggs. You can find the Hoops and Talks podcast at Hoops and Talks. The next Women's Hoops and Talks meetup is going to be on January 5th. We're going to get together and watch the Blazers take on Miami. That should be fun to see how Myers Leonard is doing, Mr. Ultra Miami. That ought to do it for me. I think I said my handle already, TCB Biggs, Blazers Edge, all that good stuff. We will talk to you all later.
Bye.
Hey, sports fans, if you want to stay in the know with the latest news surrounding the Oregon Ducks, you need to listen to the weekly Webfoot Review podcast on iTunes and Spotify. I'm Jordan Schultz, and every week I'll be here breaking down what's going on in Eugene and how it affects Oregon's football and basketball teams. So if you want unfiltered news and opinions delivered by a lifelong Ducks fan, subscribe to the weekly Webfoot Review on iTunes and Spotify. Go Ducks!